Good evening and good to have you with us on this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, we begin with the developing story right now. As we speak, Prime Minister Modi is holding a conference with the chief ministers of all states. And for past several hours, the discussion has been on what should be the strategy from here on. Many chief ministers have batted for extension of the lockdown. Punjab Chief Minister says there has to be a well-planned exit strategy. The Tamil Nadu, Telangana Chief Ministers are saying this is not the time to restart your rail services. And the meeting is continuing. We are being given to understand it could go off for some more time. Ayushman has been tracking that story for us and is here with all the details of what's been discussed so far. Ayushman?
Well, Tanvi, first of all, the Prime Minister, for the fifth time, this meeting is taking place in which the Prime Minister started. First of all, said that the efforts of India is being acknowledged all across the world where the lockdown is being implemented and it is being followed by the people. And we have seen the cases going down currently if you compare with the worldwide level. At the same time, Tanvi, it was also discussed as to if the economic activities have started and now it's time that they would also gather pace. One thing that was said was that the rural areas, the pandemic has not gone to the rural areas and we should ensure that it does not happen as well. There were several chief ministers, like you pointed out, Tamil Nadu and Telangana. They have said that currently the train services should not start. Similarly, in the Delhi chief minister suggested that barring the containment zones because we know in the national capital, all the 11 districts are there in red zone. The economic activities barring the red zone should be started. The Punjab chief minister appealed for an extension. At the same time, the Odisha chief minister said that a separate unit should be devised for zoning of the areas which are in the red zones. Also demanded for an SOP for the economic restart that we will witness. So chief ministers have been giving suggestions. The center has talked on also, Tanvi, but the most important aspect remains that the Prime Minister has been regularly in touch with the chief ministers over the situation of the COVID-19 in the country. We are expecting a decision on what will happen post this lockdown, because the number which we were expecting that will go down has unfortunately not gone down. It is increasing, and in that scenario, what will be centre's decision? Will the economic aspect be considered, or the Prime Minister's slogan that he says "Jaan bhi jahan bhi"? Will that be considered? That remains to be seen. But for now, definitely the meeting is on. It will go on for more some time, because there are several states, northeastern states and UP, Bihar, all of them, and Madhya Pradesh, the chief ministers are yet to speak.
All right, Ayushman, thanks so much for joining us and bringing us those updates. We're going to keep coming back to you, as we get more details of what is being discussed, because this is the all-crucial meeting. This will, pay way for whatever gets decided post the end of this lockdown 3.0. Of course, irrespective of the lockdown conditions, many other decisions are being taken, and one of them has been the resumption of some train services. Ayushman, we'll keep coming back to you. Thank you for that. But let's move on to that point of the conversation. Now, you heard some chief ministers say, viewers, that this is not the time to start rail services. The government has decided and has initiated rail services for 15 pairs of trains. That's effectively 30 rail services going back and forth on these 15 specific routes. The bookings for these began this evening online. There was a bit of a hitch, obviously because of the heavy traffic perhaps, and the bookings were supposed to open at 4 p.m. but they got delayed. Now, what do we need to know about how this is going to function? Let me just tell you that before we actually go on to the details of what the conversation is tonight. There will not be any blankets or linen provided. People have to get their own. There will be limited food provided. Bookings can only be done online. Bookings can only be cancelled online. No travel agents or IRCTC agents or railway agents can actually get you the tickets. You won't get them at the railway station as well. Now, despite this decision, today we saw lots of people, hundreds of them at various railway stations gathering there, because obviously there are thousands of these people in our country today who want to get home, who are stuck elsewhere and want to go back to their home villages or towns and cities. That being said, the big debate is, should we open it up further? Should we start our rail services further, improve our connectivity, let some amount of movement, keeping social distancing and basic screening in mind, let that movement begin? What about our plane services? Should we start some of our airlines and flights connectivity, at least between cities that are not so badly affected by COVID right now? What about public transport? If you start railways and you start your airlines, you will need some amount of public transport. Otherwise, how are people expected to reach the railway station or the airports? What should be India's strategy to open up public transport? When should we do it? That's the big conversation that I want to have this evening. So let's say good evening to the guests who are joining us right now. Tuhin Sinha, spokesperson for the BJP, Dr. Oommen John, public health expert and senior researcher at the George Institute of Global Health India, and Amit Thakran, managing consulting and research for CAPA South Asia. Amit, good evening, and let's begin with you. And let's talk about, the air travel. Of course, there is no denying the fact that it is impacting the business. But can we look at a strategy where you gradually start opening it up, specific airports, restricted number of people, restricted number of flights, and just get on with at least some amount of air travel?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, good evening. Thank you for inviting me on this chat. I think we at CAPA are of the opinion that we should definitely look at opening up the aviation sector now. How long can we wait? At some point, we have to resume. But the challenge is shutting down, was slightly easier. But the challenges with respect to resumption will be almost all the entire fleet is grounded. Resuming 600 aircraft will be a challenge. Then government is, certain pockets in the government are of the view that we may open up airports restrictively. And some of the metro airports are right now in red zones. If you don't open up the metro airports, I think most of the airlines won't consider flying, because metro airports in India account for 65 to 66% of the overall traffic. If you restrict air travel movements at those airports, I think it will be very difficult for airlines to consider flying resume operations at this stage. So these will be certain challenges that the industry will face once the government decides to lift restrictions. If passengers can't reach airport on time, if passengers from Delhi's catchment, from Gurgaon, let's say, can't reach Delhi airport, or from Noida can't reach Delhi airport, then how will the airlines be able to get passengers on board? At this stage, when the demand itself will going to be very weak, the consumer sentiment is very low. If we restrict a significant portion of the market by not allowing them to be operational, I think it will be very difficult for the industry to resume operations.
Okay, so that's as far as the industry's view is also concerned, and in a staggered way that we can look at it. Let me also bring in a health expert and understand from him. Dr. John, what's your view? Many countries internationally have begun some amount of public transport, but of course, India is a very different case. We have a large number of people here. Everything gets crowded when you talk about public transport, be it airports or railway stations, and that could become a challenge. How do we go about this?
Thank you. So the virus is here and it is here to stay. So we have two options. One is to stay locked in forever and wait for the virus to disappear, or wait till a vaccine is ready and then immunize everyone. And just imagine trying to immunize or vaccinate 1.3 billion. Let's assume a large number of them are still not immune, and therefore you have to vaccinate them. That's going to take at least a year or more than that. So what do you have? So you have to recognize that the virus is here and it is transmitting, and we have to take calculated steps. So one of the biggest concerns would be when opening up, are these interior places to which people are traveling ready enough in terms of their health system's capacity to be able to pick up people who are really serious, who need hospitalized care, perhaps intensive care and ventilators. So that is a primary question here.
Yes. Yes. So, what would you suggest? How do we go about it? Because in some of the international countries, we have some amount of screening that can take place. But if we start to screen people at our airports and railway stations, that could get very, very difficult by the sheer number of travelers which are there. Now, railways has started 15 trains. But that's very small in comparison to the kind of operations that they usually carry out, which means that a lot of people are still stuck everywhere. Should we wait longer or should we start opening up now?
No, there's nothing called a perfect time for opening up. So we have waited. We have had several of these viral applications cycles that were tried to be contained. So if we take an average of 14 days to 28 days, we have almost given 2 such cycles. So just imagine somebody who is, let's say, coming from a remote area and he's been working here in Delhi for some time and now needs to get back to his home, which is perhaps in a rural area. And in the rural area, he might have much more facility to physically distance and be living in the comfort of his home and have more space to be secure. So it is a calculated risk. We will have to take those risks. But like I mentioned previously, we need to be, I'm not suggesting that we need to screen everybody before sending them. But let's assume that some of these people who are traveling in, particularly into remote areas, fall sick there. And some of them are likely to infect their parents or people who are vulnerable in terms of having comorbidities. So the health systems in those areas need to be able to handle these people who are falling sick. Also, we know that about 80% of the people would have only very mild or would be largely asymptomatic even if they are getting infected. So we have to be prepared in terms of being able to handle people who are likely to get infected. And if they do fall sick, we should have systems in place to make sure they are treated and they recover like anybody else.
Okay, let me also bring in Tuhin Sinha. Tuhin Sinha, of course, I know that the decision will have to be taken between the states and the center. But at some point, Tuhin, we have to start looking at opening up. Now, we've started with 15 trains. Perhaps we need to step that up. And if trains are functioning, then why not flights?
Well, Tanvi, if you look at the train schedule which has been put out and the strict protocols which have been put in place, this is primarily to facilitate urgent, inevitable travel, because in the same way that migrant workers had been stranded in different cities, in the same way that NRIs wanted to return to their respective homes, a huge chunk of middle class population also wanted to get back to their homes. So at the moment, since most of the businesses, since most of the industries and the workplaces are shut, this is primarily to ensure necessary travel. And at the same time, there are people in whose homes tragedies have taken place. There are unwell parents. So all of these people were trying to get back to their homes. And in the absence of train travel and in the absence of plane travel, they would inevitably have to travel by road, as we have seen in different places across the country, leading to chaos and leading to social distancing norms being broken. So I think this is a good move to begin with. 10 days down the line, I'm sure we could review the situation. But prima facie, with the kind of protocols which have been put in place, limited number of passengers, the thermal screening before they start their journeys, compulsory face masks, and I'm told many of these trains would be providing face shields also. Besides, some 200 COVID care centers are being set up in stations across the country. So all of these should ensure that due care is taken to ensure the disease does not spread. And in due course of time, in a week or 10 days, my sense is that limited air travel would also be beginning. The aviation minister has already spoken on those lines, and it's a matter of time.
Okay, Tuhin, I also had one other doubt, which is to say that why have we, while I agree that when you say that the trains that have been scheduled right now are to facilitate emergency travel, but why just the AC trains? Aren't we restricting the movement for people by saying only the air-conditioned trains, only for people who can book it online?
My sense is that my understanding is that it is purely from the point of view of sanitization and necessary protocols being followed. Because in any case, some 366 Shramik trains or migrant trains have already been run. The Honorable Railway Minister has already stated that there are 300 more migrant trains which are ready to run in the next 4 or 5 days. So, in addition to that, these trains are to facilitate middle class and upper middle class. And once the aircraft start, I think pretty much all sections of people who have been stranded across the country will be taken care of. But these 10 days or these 2 weeks would also give us an idea of how we are prepared to move out of this lockdown period. Because prima facie, if you see, COVID-19 is limited to the main spread is limited to certain centers. In fact, Maharashtra is contributing 33% of it. So it really depends on how these 10 days go. If we can make sure that upon reaching their destination, proper quarantine facilities are provided, or people voluntarily behave in a responsible manner where they take due care to put themselves in quarantine, we might just be able to pull it off. And that would be a good precedent to begin larger activities post 2 weeks.
Okay, let me actually go back to our health expert also in this question, because it's really right now, it confuses me, because we are being told constantly that air conditioning should not be used, that we should not use our air conditioners in our rooms, in our offices, even in the quarantine facilities where we are keeping some amount of patients. So why is it that right now when we're looking at train travel, we are saying that only the air conditioned factories should be used? Dr. John, any views on that?
Well, the decision makers would have taken into consideration the comfort of the people, and that would be the thing. But from a pure health perspective, closed loop air circulation mechanism such as the air conditioning is not a good idea, because if let's assume that some of the people who got in to the train were actually having the virus and they were asymptomatic, or they were thermal screen negative, but they were still harboring the virus, and a closed loop air circulation mechanism would definitely make it move faster. But I'm sure people looking into it would be doing the necessary protocols such as HEPA filters and regular sanitization, even within the air circulation systems. If that is taken into consideration, I think it's a choice that we have to make.
Okay, all right. Amit, Thakran, let me get back to you on, and some insights on how this is being done globally. Have we seen resumption of airlines and air travel in other countries, and how are they going about it?
Yeah, right. I think globally also countries are taking a calibrated view on this, and they are slowly realizing that shutdown probably needs to end at some point in time. We can't keep waiting. This virus, as our health experts are also saying, this virus is here to stay, and no one knows for how long. So countries are of the opinion now that this shutdown has impacted the economy severely, and a prolonged shutdown will have an impact on, significant impact on economy, consumer sentiment, and not to mention the aviation industry has suffered a lot because of that. So countries are right now opening up slowly. China has already opened up, and other countries are also considering that they may need to take a calibrated view and open the domestic sector first, and but under certain protocols, health, keeping the safety and health measures in mind. Airlines are of the view that They will develop safety protocols and health protocols in a way that passengers are protected, their staff is protected, airports are undertaking measures such as deep cleaning and sanitizing the entire terminal at regular intervals. The aircraft will be sanitized at regular intervals. Passengers will be made compulsory to wear masks, and the airline staff will also need to either wear PPEs or some kind of protective equipments. So airlines will be opening in a couple of weeks to begin with domestic, and then later on, as the confidence builds up, as the consumer starts to travel again, I think the countries will be more open to open up their international travel. China, I think, has done superbly on that front. They have already recovered significantly on their domestic capacity. Down the line, over a couple of months, they are looking at 70-80% resumption of their domestic capacity. And they have also allowed some international flights to operate to from China, obviously under certain restrictions, under certain protocols. Some countries are thinking that they will ensure that whoever comes from other countries, even after the international travel is resumed, they will have to stay under quarantine for 14 days. For example, UK, I think, is of the opinion that they might open international travel
Yes.
under this condition. So countries are taking up, I think, calibrated view. Demand is not an on and off button. Uh, it's not going to happen that tomorrow you say we are resuming and people will start traveling. I think consumer sentiment has been impacted badly. So demand itself will take a long time to recover, and airlines will obviously begin a
Hmm.
very weak skeletal kind of capacity network, and then probably ramp up in a phased manner.
No, so let me ask you this question then, that if we do open services, there will be limited airports to begin with, limited flights, all the norms of social distancing, perhaps no more than 30% people, max 50% will be allowed to fly per flight. Is that going to really help the airline business if you fly with just this kind of an occupancy while you put in additional efforts in running the operations?
I think you rightly mentioned that these social distancing norms, which some of the governments are considering, for example, keeping the middle seat empty, because has made a suggestion to the government that we should allow airlines to resume operations under some conditions, and one of the condition is to keep middle seat empty. I think that will not help airlines. That will further make it difficult for them to resume. It'll be better for them to not fly at all if such conditions are, if government restricts them in such a way. Keeping one seat empty for an aircraft will mean that you will only allow them to operate at maximum of 60% load factor. And what will we achieve by doing that? Giving passengers 2 feet distance between themselves. I think recently IATA did a study that that's not going to limit the risk of infection on board. Health experts are of the opinion that you need at least 1.5 meter to 2 meter of distance between two people if you want to reduce the risk of getting infected. And by removing one seat, you're only adding maybe at max 1.5 to 2 feet distance between two passengers. So that's really not going to help the risk of infection, but it will definitely impact the viability of airline business. It will make sure that they continue to bleed even when the operation, air travel is restrictions are lifted. So maybe some airline may not even want to resume services under such restrictions. It'll not be beneficial for them. It'll continue to be loss making for them even if they fly under such restrictive conditions. I think what the government should do and what probably the industry should do, they should get themselves for to ensure that passenger feels safe. Passenger health obviously should be the first priority. And we should take measures what other global airlines and other countries are taking. We should provide masks to passengers, make it mandatory, do frequent cleaning, uh, do a deep aircraft cleaning, and airports should be sanitized. There should be minimum distance. That there should be enough measures taken by airports and airlines, that the social distancing norms are
Yeah.
maintained at airport while boarding, while deboarding. But I think restricting the number of passengers on board should not be an option, and that's not going to happen. That's not going to help us in any way.
Okay, for viewers who've been just tuned in, let me also take them through the rules for train travel. The train travel, which is right now begun for 15 pairs of trains, that's roughly 30 train route services. There only online bookings and cancellations are allowed. Booking via railway and IRCTC agents is not allowed. Tatkal is not permitted. Waiting list and RAC is not permitted. So you only have to have a confirmed berth that you book online. And you don't need an additional pass than when you travel from your home to the railway station, as long as you have that confirmed ticket. No catering charges will be included. No booking, pre-booking of meals. Limited eatables will be provided. No blankets or linen will be provided, obviously for safety purposes. Now, while we are looking at starting some of the train travel between cities and long distances, Tuhin, what's the view as far as the metro services are concerned, or is that something that the state governments can begin to look at?
See, it really depends on the situation in the respective states, because I'm given to understand that in the red zones, definitely it's going to take at least a month more. But in a place like Karnataka, which is pretty much ready to start maybe in the next week or 10 days, a state government can go ahead with it. But it really depends on what kind of protocols, on what kind of precautions are in place. So I think it's a decision which the larger travel decisions or the larger commutation decisions are going to be dependent upon the breakup of what zones the particular state or the particular district falls in. There are at least 300 districts at this point of time which are COVID free. So within those districts, or within those districts in a respective state, I don't see any problem in, let's suppose, public transport buses starting in the next week or 10 days. But when you come to a state like Maharashtra or Delhi or Gujarat at this point of time, I'm sure for at least the next 3 or 4 weeks, public resumption of public transport is not a good idea. And I was just hearing the other panelist, esteemed panelist also. See, when you speak about airlines' viability, I'm sure this year the focus for them would have to be on survival. They will have to devise innovative means of monetization. For example, SpiceJet had used some of their flights as cargo flights. They had used some of their passenger flights as cargo flights through this crisis. So for all you know, many of these airlines might have to just use some of their passenger flights for other purposes, just to make sure that monetization happens and they stay afloat, till the end of the year, when things will decisively improve, or when things are expected to decisively improve.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. Let me also quickly bring in Dr. John. Dr. John, again, while we look at, travel between intercities, whether it's air or train, what about within the city? Maybe for a city like Mumbai, local train travel is a big ask, and we are far, far away from that, especially considering the number of cases we have here. But some amount of resumption of public transport can be done, isn't it?
See, I think we have to take calculated small steps. So there is no perfect number or perfect day on which you can say that everything is fine. You can now open up and everybody can start traveling. So like the government is planning, it is planning in small incremental steps. It's going to take calculated efforts and risks, fully well putting into place protocols. And like the previous panelist said, it doesn't make any logical sense to have one seat in the middle empty, because when you are using a pressurized cabin, and we know that this virus is an airborne virus and it's primarily a droplet kind of a thing. It is not jumping from one person to another because they are going to be close. No, it is going to be in the air. It is going to be, if people are not wearing protective masks and things like that. So there are several things which we still don't know about this virus. So we have to take small calculated steps, not putting the population and the citizens at risk, while not holding back, because we can't wait forever.
Yes, absolutely. No, this is the point that we've been making here. Cannot hold back forever and must start to plan now, plan it properly so that there is no chaos, there is no confusion, there is no back and forth. And gradually, as we open up, we ensure that it happens with social distancing in mind, without any confusion or crowding that takes place. But we have to start to learn to, we have to learn to live with this virus. The government says it, the biggest of the health experts says it. And if we have to learn to live with this virus at least for 2020, then let's just get on with it and find ways of restarting, some parts of our life, little bit of travel, little bit of public transport, at least for people who need it urgently, who need to get from one place to the other. I'm not saying that we can get back to life as it was before March 2020, before COVID-19 hit us. We can't do that, cannot afford to do that. A large percentage of us should continue staying at home. But the necessary important travel within the city, between cities, long distances must be done. For far too long, we've restricted the migrants from going back to their homes, and look the kind of chaos that's led to, the kind of giant mess that has led to. Even now, every day, we are getting stories of migrants walking on the roads, walking around the railway tracks, falling ill on the way, dying on the way, hiding in trucks and concrete mixers, just trying whatever they can, cycling down, carrying their children and little bit of their belongings and walking for thousands of kilometers. All of this is happening because we did not plan this properly and we did not plan this on time. Let's not do that again. If we are looking at opening public transport, let's do it properly. Let's start the work on it and gradually start to open up. Cannot forever be living the life of a lockdown. Thank you to our panelists for joining us on this conversation.